created for Freakonomics Radio, and actually not just any episode, my very first try at hosting.
Welcome to People I Mostly Admire with Steve Levitt.
If you're a regular listener, then you know how frustrated I am with the current educational system. Today's episode, which first aired about 2 years ago, marked my transition from someone who only complains about a problem to someone who's trying to do something about it. So here's my question to you. Try to guess, what was the reaction when it first aired? Did it spur people into action, or angry, or was it just completely—
Hey, how's it going?
I'll tell you the answer. Yeah.
I just had a quick question about the practice that we did together on Tuesday. What was or on Monday, sorry, what was the way you wanted us to turn that in?
You're going to assuming you did the web-based version, which is what I'm going to also do today. You downloaded a copy of that to your local computer. And so you've got the XLSX file, and then you're uploading it via Blackboard, submitting it in Blackboard.
Okay, got it. So I did it the downloaded version. So if I just like saved it to my desktop, and then I could just upload it to Blackboard there.
Exactly. And we're going to do that. Excuse me. We're going to do that same process again today too. So you'll see it again. So even if you don't get that taken care of right now, you'll be able to take care of it in, about 90 minutes or so.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Get my dryer turned off.
Hold on. Where? Oh.
He was just saying to save the Excel file and then just turn it in on Blackboard, like under the assignment thing.
Yeah, do we? Oh, so we have to make the entire thing ourselves, or is there like a download thing that we have to download it and do, or?
I didn't hear the beginning of the question. I'd stepped away.
Do we have to like download an Excel file and then complete it?
Nope. You just create it from blank. That's what we did on Monday.
Okay.
And that's what we will do again today. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm already logged into my school OneDrive account, and I want to create a new Excel file, new blank workbook. I'm going to zoom in using the zoom controls in the bottom right. So there'll be a little bit of repetition today, but I'm not averse to repetition. I think it's easier to remember stuff that way. So I'm going to zoom in, mostly to make it nice and big, easy to read. And I'm going to take a moment to give this a file name. I'm going to call it CIS 101 Participation 6B. So I'm using the web-based Excel 365, saving it online. But when I'm all done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click File and Save As, and I'm going to download a copy to my local computer, and then you'll be able to turn it in via Blackboard. And in fact, I think most of the things we did on our Monday, I'm probably going to end up reproducing here on this workbook. So if you don't have that Monday file, that's okay. You can turn this one in as both, I think, because we're going to do more stuff on here. And there's a couple things I didn't get to on Monday that I wanted to. So I'm going to make sure I hit those. And we're going to organize our data in a I think, a better, more smarter format. So, yeah, so if you didn't take care of the Monday or the Tuesday participation, whatever it was, then don't worry about it. What we do today as a group, you'll be able to turn in for both. I mean, with participation, it's mostly about putting in that effort. I'm not looking to see, how accurate stuff is, but it kind of forces us to give a little hands-on practice with Excel. Now, don't forget there's resources in your Blackboard as well under the week 6 folder. So it's not just following along with class, but there's also online videos, things that you should be reading, checking out that way. So I am in my new file, Participation 6B. That's what I'm going to be working on today. Let me just kind of adjust my Zoom stuff so I can see the chat window a little more easily. Excellent. sharing my screen, got the recorder going, so class recording will be available later. And I'm going to start right away in the lower left, where I currently have my sheet 1 sheet tab. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to call this basic budget, and I'll click OK. Now, I know we've done some basic budget stuff before, just as kind of an exercise. There was a topic, we were talking about the needs for college students and finances and stuff. And we're going to do it again, but we're going to do something a little bit different. And we're going to really rely on Excel to help us out. In particular, I'm going to talk to you about a little kind of an organization system called the 50-30-20 plan. Don't need to look that up or make note of that right now. But I want to use Excel to keep track of a few basic budget items. And then once we've got that, we're going to be using some calculations in order to add things up. We're going to use some division in order to figure out percentages. I want to format as a percentage, and I want to create at least one pie chart. I think I want to create 2 pie charts. That was on my agenda for Monday. I didn't get to the pie chart. So definitely I want to do that pie chart today. And I want to use a few other functions that are built in. And I'm just glancing over at my little list of things that I wanted to work on. And yeah, so a few more functions to take care of. Looks like some conditional formatting. So yeah, there'll be a couple things that we're going to get into. So let's see what we can do here. I'm on my basic budget sheet. Now remember, an Excel file is called a workbook. Workbook has a collection of worksheets. We are currently working on one worksheet, but we're going to be adding several other worksheets to this workbook. I'm going to start off. I'm going to select cells A1 through K1, and I'm going to click my merge button, which is on the home ribbon. We did that on Monday, so I'm just kind of repeating a few skills. And what I'm going to type in this big merged cell is basic budget 50, 30, 20. Okay, and then I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to select that cell that has that text, and I'm going to change my font, make my font a little bigger, and I'm going to make my text a little greener, and I'm going to make my fill color or my cell background color a little yellower. Yeah, just a few little styling things. And I guess I'll go ahead and bold this too. All right, happy with that. Now, the way we're going to do this, and this is going to take a little bit of careful thought, but I am going to repeat a couple steps here, is I'm going to select cells A3 and B3. Now, when I select a range of cells, I'm clicking on the middle of one cell and dragging over to the middle of another cell. So I've selected A3 and B3 together as a range, and I'm going to click my merge button. Cool. And I'm going to go ahead and write in, this is going to be income. Now, here's a little trick that we could probably use to be maybe just a little bit more efficient. I'm going to try this out here. I'm going to select, actually, I don't even know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to select C3 and D3. So I've got those 2 cells selected, C3 and D3. I'm going to hold down the control key on my keyboard, and I'm going to select E3 and F3. My control key is still held down. And then I'm going to select G3 and H3. My control key is still pressed down. Let's see. I think that might be okay. Now I'm not going to let go of my control key yet, but I'm going to click the merge button and see what happens. Ooh, I think this worked. Now I'm going to let go of my control key. And what that did is it merged my C3D3, E3F3, G3H3. I've never done that before. I'm going to Control Z and undo it. I'm going to try it again. So let's see, over here, I'm going to write income. Actually, in theory, I guess I could Control Z even more. Okay, so I'm kind of back to a beginning state. I'm going to do this again. However, I'm going to do another set of cells. I'm going to select, I'm not holding my mouse button yet. I'm going to select A3, B3. Now I'm going to hold down my control key. Mac users, you probably do your command key, I guess. And then I'm going to select, my control key is pressed down. I'm leaving it pressed down. I'm going to select C3, D3, E3, F3, and G3, H3. Control key is still pressed down. And now I'm going to click the merge button on my home ribbon. Now I'm going to let go of the control key. And now I can just click away to deselect. And what that's done is it's merged those 4 sets of 2 cells each. Now I can go to each one and I can write in income. Do you remember what key I can press in order to move my cell marker to the right? One key moves it down. Perfect. Thanks, Marcus. And the other key moves it to the right. The tab key moves it to the right. So if I press my tab key right now, it moves to the right. And I can put in something like expenses, needs. And then I can press my tab key again. Expenses, wants. Press my tab key again. Saving, investing. And then I can just press enter now. So I'm creating these column labels for some data that we're going to be putting in. So far, we've just put in text content. Income, expenses, needs, expenses, wants, saving, and investing. And that's on my row 3. Those cells are merged. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky. I'm going to manually increase the width of my column A. And I'm doing that just by putting my cursor in between the A and the B column letters, so I get that double arrow. And I'm making column A roughly 111 pixels, I guess. I'm just eyeballing it. So something over 100 pixels. And then I'm going to leave column B the way it is. Now check this out. I'm going to go ahead and select a handful of cells, including my income label. So notice I'm selecting this range. It doesn't really matter how many rows I'm selecting. It looks like I'm getting 6. So I'm getting 6 rows of cells beneath my label. If you only do 4 or 5, or if you do 7 or 8, doesn't matter. Our basic budget that we're going to be creating here is not going to be completely realistic, but it's going to be kind of a shell, a template that you could use if you wanted to make it more detailed in the future. Okay, so I've got those selected. I've got those cells selected. Now what I'm going to do on my home ribbon, there is a border button. It's on the home ribbon. It's towards the left side. And it looks like a little, I guess a little table, little grid. I'm going to click on that. And one of the buttons in here is the all borders. So you've got those cells selected. And now I'm going to the all borders option. I'm going to click on that. And that's going to display borders for those ranges of cells that I had selected for income. Now, let me remind you too, I think I mentioned this on Monday, but for these participation activities, I don't want you to worry too much about how close they match up with mine. That's not the goal for this. The goal for this is hands-on practice. So while you are studying Excel, while you're watching videos, I really want you to have Excel open and so that you can get some hands-on practice. It'll be much easier to remember and learn that stuff if you're physically doing it while you're reading about it, either seeing me do it or seeing somebody else do it on a video or reading a little article or feature or resource or something like that. Get hands-on practice with it. I promise you, this is what I do for all kinds of topics. If I'm going to read an article on something, I want to try that thing in the article, even though I'm not going to master it from doing it once, but it's going to give me some hands-on exposure. So I'm going to have a better understanding of how to do that particular thing. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. Now I'm going to select, let's see, how do I want to do this? Actually, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to select columns A and B. Notice I'm just clicking right on the actual column letter A, dragging over to B. I'm selecting columns A and B. And then I'm going to click my format painter, which is that little yellow paintbrush. It's over there on the left side of the home ribbon, the format painter. I'm going to click it once. And now I'm going to select columns C and D. Oh, they can't do that because of my merge cell. All right, no big deal. I'm going to click OK. So in order to show you this thing that I want to do, I need to get rid of the merge status of my big cell A1. It's going to temporarily look pretty bad, but I'm not too worried. So I'm going to click on that big cell A1, and I want to get rid of the merge. So I'm going to look, I've clicked on cell A1, and then I'm going to unmerge my cells. So my A1 looks a little weird, but it's okay. I'm going to fix it soon enough. Now that I've done that, here's what I can do. I can select columns A and B just by clicking right on the column letter A and then dragging over to the middle of the column letter B. Again, I'm going to do my format painter, but you know what I'm going to do this time? I'm going to double click my format painter. 1, 2, okay? So I'm going to double click the format painter. And I don't know if this is going to work. Okay. On the web-based version, apparently I can't double click the format painter, but if the installed version of Excel, you can. So I'm gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way. I'm gonna select columns A and B. I'm gonna click my format painter once, and I'm gonna select columns C and D. Cool. I'm gonna click on my format painter again, and I'm gonna select columns E and F. Happy with that? I'm going to click my format painter again, and I'm going to select columns G and H. All this is really doing is it's copying the formatting from one group of cells over to another group of cells. That's what's happening there. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm going to select A1 through K1 again, and I'm going to merge so that that big cell A1 is taking up that full width of space. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. So far, we've entered text data into cells. We've added borders to cells. That was a new feature for today. And we've used the format painter. Oh, we've also resized some columns, and we use the format painter in order to apply existing formats over to new cells. Cool. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select these labels, and I'm just going to jazz them up a little bit. I think I'll do my dark green and my bold. That's fine. Okay. Now, underneath income, expenses, wants, and savings investing, I'm going to write a couple labels. We are creating a pretend budget. It's not going to be very complete, and we're going to make up a few things. We're going to make up a few categories, and we're going to make up a few numbers, but I still think it's going to be pretty cool. And then what I'm going to do under income, I'm going to start to write in some labels. I'm going to put in job pay. Okay. And then maybe got 2 jobs. All right. Second job pay. Maybe you're a Twitch streamer. Something like that. So I'm going to have a few income sources. And then next to each of these in the smaller cells to the right, I'm just going to pretend put in some numbers. Oh, I'm going to do it. Let's try. Oh, wait, second job. Well, a second job would be better. And then Twitch streams will do 350. I'm not a Twitch streamer, but I'm always fascinated by people that do stuff. I really am, I'm intrigued by people that do various little side hustles, even if it doesn't seem like they're making a ton of money. You know, doing something on the side that you find entertaining, which makes, who knows, 100, couple hundred, 300 bucks extra per month, I think is friggin' awesome. So now I'm going to do something similar for expenses. I'm going to make up some expenses, and let's see, we got rent, food, utilities, And let's go ahead and put in car. I'll just have 4 needed expenses. Now, expenses that are labeled as needs, these are the really important expenses, meaning you cannot avoid them for a month. If you avoid the rent, bad stuff happens. If you avoid food, bad stuff happens. If you avoid paying utilities, electric, gas, whatever, bad stuff happens. If you avoid paying car payments or car maintenance or gas for the car, then bad stuff happens. Okay. Now I'm going to jump over. Oh, I guess I'll put some numbers in here. I'm just throwing in some numbers. Now, of course, in the real world, we have more expenses than this, but that's okay. If we can get this worksheet to work with just a handful of expenses, a handful of examples, even if they're not realistic, the calculations will be accurate, and then you can use that later on. And by the way, since you're turning this in to me, no need to put realistic numbers. I don't need to know your personal finances. You can just put in the same numbers I'm doing, or just put in fake numbers or numbers that you would like to have. Okay, now under expenses once, these are going to be expenses that are relatively optional in our lives, meaning, if we didn't spend the money, we wouldn't, nothing necessarily terrible happens. For example, I might have dining out. And then of course, TV streaming services, like the Hulus and the Netflixes and all that fun stuff. Let's do one more on here. Let's see, we got dining out, we got TV streaming. What about just plain old entertainment? Last night, I just bought, there's a Led Zeppelin tribute band playing at the Tower Theater in December. So I got a couple tickets to that for my wife and I. But, and that came to like $50 or so. Yeah, like $52 for 2 tickets, the cheaper ones. But that would be an entertainment expense right there. Definitely not essential to go see the Led Zeppelin tribute band. Oddly enough, a couple days earlier, I got tickets to an AC/DC tribute band playing in Grants Pass in November. So apparently I'm going to a lot of tribute bands. Okay, I'll change that to entertainment, and I'm going to throw in some numbers. Let's see, TV streaming. I'll put a real number here. I use Hulu, Netflix, and Amazon Prime. I'll count Amazon Prime. And they're all roughly about $10 a month. So I'll put down $30 for that. And then entertainment. Okay, feeling pretty good about this. Now, for savings and investing, I'm going to put a couple categories for this. I'm going to put build emergency fund. Actually, I'll just write emergency fund. And then Roth IRA, which is a retirement account. And then for emergency fund, we should all have an emergency fund that's at least $1,000. And then maybe we build up. You should build up your emergency fund so that it's like maybe 6 months of expenses. Okay. But in order to build an emergency fund, you got to put money into it on a regular monthly basis. Let's say I'm putting in $100 on the regular. Now, Roth IRA is retirement. I'm a bit older than most of you folks, so retirement is a bigger deal in my life. If you're young and then maybe you're not even aware of what these kinds of things are, but still, it's something that I'm going to put on here just so we can have a couple of things. And I'm going to put down 500 on there. Now, here's a question for you. Does everybody have at least one row at the bottom? If you don't have a row at the bottom, maybe you added more expenses than I did. So if you don't have a row at the bottom, you can add a new row. So here's what I'm going to do to insert a new row. For me, my last row of information is on row 9. I'm going to right click. Actually, I'll click on row 9 just to be sure I'm selecting the entire row. And then I'm going to right click on row 9. And then I'm going to insert rows. And that gives me a new blank row, or at least it pushes stuff down. Now, it could mean that you have content on that very last row. So something you could do, let's say I had content on here, on this last row. But now I want to move it up. Okay, well, that's pretty easy. What I can do this in a couple ways. I'll do it this way. I could select the cells at that bottom row that have that content. I could Control C to copy, select the cells in the blank row above it, Control V as in Victor to paste, and that kind of duplicates it. And then I could select those bottom cells and just hit the delete on my keyboard and clean it out. So just different ways to go. Could have also done a cut and paste. That would have been pretty nice. Or you could do a move operation. A move operation is when you select cells and drag the border. Either way, got some stuff there. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one too. Now, on whatever your bottom row is, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and put in total. Okay. Now for each of these total cells, we're going to add up the cells above. So I know some of you have had some more experience with Excel than others. So if you've got a feeling for what I'm going to be doing here, go ahead and work ahead of me and go ahead and plug in the sums of all your income, the sums of all your needed expenses, the sum of all your want expenses, and the sum of all your saving and investing. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to click on the cell that's going to contain my sum. I'm going to try something here. Oh, I just pressed Alt equals. That's a pretty good one. So the Alt key plus the equal key. Oops, what did I just do? I just closed my chat window. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. Let me escape, get out of there. So basically, I'm clicking on this empty cell where I want my sum to go. And for me, it's B10. And then I'm just going to press Alt equals on my keyboard, and I see that it's trying to add up B4 through B9. Actually, I'm okay with that. Even though some of those cells are empty, I'm perfectly fine with adding them all up. So I'm going to press my Enter key to accept that function. Cool. And now I'm going to do the same kind of thing for my expense needs. I'm going to activate the cell where I want the total to go. And then I'm going to press Alt equals. I'm going to visually look at it to make sure it looks accurate. I'm summing D4 through D9, even though some of those are blank. I'm going to press Enter. I'm going to repeat that again for my expense wants, Alt equals. Now notice this sum function is pretty simple. We could handwrite that ourselves. So if I wasn't doing the keyboard shortcut, I could just write out equals sum parentheses, and then I could just select those cells, and I'll do F4 through F9, closing parentheses, and I'll press my Enter key. Some of you might even be using the auto sum button, which is on the home ribbon towards the right side. Perfectly okay. I'll do this last one here. I'll just do Alt equals. H4 through H9 looks good to me. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. Next thing I want to do is I want to format all of these dollar amounts. I want to format them all into an accounting format with no decimal places. And I want to format them all at once. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select my cells B4 through B10. So I've selected the range of cells B4 through B10. Now I'm going to hold down my Control key. And I'm going to select D4 through D10. My Control key is still pressed down. I'm going to select F4 through F10. Control key is still pressed down. And I'm going to select H4 through H10. Now I'm going to let go of my mouse. My Control key is still pressed down. I think I'm in pretty good shape selection wise. So I'm going to let go of my control key. Those cells are all selected. And I'm going to take a moment on my home ribbon. I'm going to look for the number formatting option, and I'm going to look for the accounting format. And then I'm going to apply the accounting format to all of those selected cells. Now, because I don't need the decimals, I don't need the cents, while those cells are all still selected, by the way, I'm going to look on my home ribbon and I'm looking for the number formatting area, and I want to decrease the number of decimals that I'm showing. Okay. How's everyone doing on this so far? Any issues? I know I'm going quick on a few things, so I'm trying to repeat, do the same actions multiple times. Cool. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and format my bottom cells here. I'll just make them, yeah, I guess I'll do green and bold again. Okay, I feel pretty good about this. Next thing we're going to do, and I want us all to do this next step here, especially because it's going to be a little bit trickier. I want to focus our attention on this bottom row. I'm sorry, the row just beneath the totals. Okay. And what I want to know, what do I want to know? I want to know, do I want to do that there? I take it back. I'm changing my mind here. We've got a blank row just above our expenses, our income and expenses. That blank, that row number 2. Now, if you don't have a blank row there, then click on your row 2, right click on your row 2 and choose to insert rows, and you'll insert a new blank row. But I've got a row here. Now, after you insert a row, it may be formatted in some funny way. So what you can do is you can select the cells above, you can select those cells that are formatted in a funny way. And then what you want to do next is then you could look on your home ribbon and look for, I think they've got it on here somewhere. So it's over on the far right in the More button, but there's an editing to clear formats. So you can clear the formatting of cells in one shot. Mine's already blank though, so I'm not too worried about it. Now what I'm going to do here is, yeah, I think I'll do some more merging. I'm going to select a couple cells above income and I'm going to merge. A couple cells above expenses needs and merge. A couple cells above expenses and merge. A couple cells above savings and merge. I'm going to make my row 2 taller, so it's nice and big and chunky. Okay. Now here's what I want to find out. I want to find out what is the percentage or the ratio of my needed expenses compared to my income. So here's what I'm going to write. I've got a space up here above my expenses needs. I'm going to write a formula equals my total expenses divided by my income, my total needed expenses. So this is a formula. Notice, even for a formula, you always start with an equal sign. If you're writing a function like sum or average, you start with an equal sign. If you're writing a formula, you start with an equal sign. With Excel, you can enter pretty much 3 things into a cell. You can enter text, which we've done multiple times. You can enter numbers, which we've done multiple times, but you can also enter formulas or functions. Whenever you do a formula or function, you always start with an equal sign. That way Excel knows that you're about to put in a formula or function. All right, I'm going to press my enter key. And I'm getting a pretty funny looking number, but it's just the decimal version of a percent. So I can click on the cell that contains that decimal version, and then I can go to my number formatting dropdown and convert it to a percentage display. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. While that cell is selected, I'm going to decrease decimals, so I only show one decimal place. I'm also going to play around with the formatting. I'm going to change the vertical alignment of this cell so that it's centered vertically. And I'm going to make the font nice and big. Okay, now if I want to re-look at that formula that I wrote, I can double click on that cell, which takes me into edit mode, and I can look at it. And I see Excel is helping me out by putting that color coding on there. So I can see, my blue D10, which is my total needed expenses, is being divided by my red B10, which is my total income. D10 divided by B10. Now, of course, if your worksheet is a little different than mine, you don't want to copy me exactly. You want to look at your cells and you need to write your formula so that it's accurate for your data. For me, it's D10 divided by B10. And I can see that my needed expenses are 55% of my income. So I'm not really following that 50-30-20 rule quite yet. My needed expenses seem to be a little bit too high based on my income. All right, well, I'll come back to that soon enough. Now I want to do the same thing for my want expenses and my saving and investing. Now, I could just repeat that process. It was a pretty simple formula, right? So I could just go ahead and retype equals, in this case, F10 divided by B10. And then I can get my answer that way and then format it as a percent and stuff. Let me go ahead and click on the cell that's got my big percentage format. I'm going to click on the format painter, little yellow paintbrush, and I'm going to select these other two big cells so that when I do get those percentages in there, they're formatted all in the same way. Now there's something else I could do too. I just deleted that. Here's something else I could do. I could click on the cell that contains that division formula that I'm happy with, and I could Control C to copy. I could select these two other cells and Control V as in Victor to paste. And I get some percentages. However, something looks a little fishy. You don't have to be a math genius for this class. However, you do need to be able to look at some numbers and say, wait a minute, something doesn't quite make sense. I understand why I got 55% because 2290 is a little bit more than half of 4100. 14%, yeah, maybe we can't do the math in our heads to figure that one out. However, in order to be 10%, my expenses would have to be at least 415. That would be 10%. So we know that number is not right. And we definitely know 181% is not correct. That number is way wonky. So our warning bells should be, going off. So I've made a mistake. Now, if I double click on my first cell that I feel confident is accurate, I can see the formula is D10 divided by B10. All right, well, that looks good. That makes sense. I'm going to press enter to accept. Now I'm going to double click on this other formula for expenses once. And I see it's F10 divided by D10. That is not correct. These all need to be divided by my income, my total income. I'm going to press enter to accept. And I'm going to double click on this one that's way off, this 181%. And I see that's H10 divided by F10. That is definitely wrong. So copying and pasting can work if you're careful. So what I'm going to do, I'll press enter to escape. I'm going to select these two cells, hit delete on my keyboard and empty them out. Okay, I'm going to double click on that first formula that I wrote. I'm going to make a correction to it. In my formula, I'm going to put my insertion point somewhere in front of or in the middle of the B10 cell reference. And I'm going to press the F4 key on my keyboard. And it's going to put those dollar signs in there. Now, if you're on a Mac, it's not the F4 key. I cannot remember which key it is. I think it might be Command T on the Mac. If that's not correct, then you can manually type those dollar signs in there. So I've got D10 divided by $B, $10. That's called an absolute cell reference. There we go. That's called an absolute cell reference. Whenever you want to have multiple formulas referencing the same cell, you want to use absolute references. Since all three of these formulas are going to reference my cell B10, I want B10 to be absolute. Now, when I press my enter key right now to accept this change, you're not going to notice a difference. And by the way, those dollar signs have nothing to do with currency or accounting or money. Those dollar signs are simply a symbol to tell the spreadsheet that this is an absolute cell reference. But what's nice about this, now I can select that cell that contains that formula. Control C to copy. I can select these other two cells for expenses once and savings investing. Control V as in Victor to paste. And it's going to put those percentages in there, and those are going to be accurate percentages. Because now, if I double click on my expense once ratio, it's going to be F10 divided by B10. That's exactly what I want. Enter to accept. If I click on this other one, 14.5%, it's H10 divided by B10. That's exactly what I want. Now, based on my income that I've got here, my needed expenses ratio is too high. It's too high. It should be 50%. I've got 55%. My want expenses is too low. It should be closer to 30%. I've only got 8%. That's a nice problem to have. And of course, my savings investing is a little bit too low too. It should be like 20%, and I've got about 14.5%. Now, of course, this whole 50, 30, 20 thing is just a rule of thumb. It's not necessarily realistic for all people. It's especially not necessarily realistic for college students. You know, in college, you've got some pretty high expenses in the form of tuition, you know, so that's a pretty big expense that a lot of folks don't have. And that expense can easily, you know, approach $1,000, $1,500 a month or more, depending on where you're going to school. So if you're working on a bachelor's degree in computer science somewhere at a university, even an Oregon university, yeah, that could easily be $2,000 a month. If you're doing community college classes like we are, it's a little bit more affordable, but it can still approach several hundred a month quite easily, you know. So you've got that unusual expense. Now that whether you classify tuition as an expense wants or an expense need, could be. My thought is, has nothing to do with Excel, just a kind of a personal finance thought. If you are paying for school, that is like investing in yourself. So what I might do if I was paying for school is have it over in my savings and investing area. And it could be, you know, schooling. And then who knows, maybe schooling is costing $680 a month. I'm just picking up a number. How do we figure out that month? You know, you just basically take what is your tuition for a particular term, how much did you spend on books for that particular term, add it all up, and divide it by, let's say, divide it by 4 months within a term, and that would be your monthly schooling expense. So let's try it out. Let's be a little bit more realistic. I'm going to do this off to the side here. This would be a good opportunity. Let's say I'm going to write the word credits, and let's say I'm taking 14 credits of school. And I know the cost per credit, if you look in the college catalog, the cost per credit, let's just say, is 110 bucks, something like that. So that total is going to be equal to the cell that contains my credits multiplied by the cost per credit. Enter. Comes out to about 1540. Now, I'm not worried about formatting these as accounting. Notice the asterisk is the multiplication symbol there. I'm just using it to make sure my estimates seem a little bit accurate. However, I've also got books and stuff. Books and fees, you could put all that together. And you just think back, how much did you have to spend on books and extra fees? So for instance, if you were doing a culinary class, maybe the fees are pretty high because you have to buy like a set of knives and you have to buy that big puffy white hat, I think. So some courses, the fees are pretty expensive. Other courses, the fees aren't so bad. But you kind of added up, how much were books? In this class, the book was $0. But in other classes you're taking, maybe the book was $100, maybe even $150. All depends. But you think, well, how much did you spend on books this term? All right, well, maybe it was $200. And now we got another total. This total is going to be equal to my total tuition plus my books and fees. I'm up to like almost $1,800 now. Now, of course, depending on the school, you could put in some other expenses as well. Back when I was a student, and even when I was teaching, I worked at University of South Florida in Tampa, where I went to school, but I also taught at University of Central Florida in Orlando. Go Knights. And for both of those schools, we had to pay for parking. And there was different prices you could get for parking in different areas. If you parked way out in the boonies, then you got to pay, I think it was maybe 50 or 60 bucks a year or something like that. And if you wanted to park closer, then it was approaching closer to like 200 bucks a year. So it all depends. So parking would be a consideration at some schools for sure. That would be an expense that maybe is on a semester or term basis. And you could put other expenses in here too, if they are unique to schooling. Meaning, if you weren't going to school, you wouldn't have the expense. If you are going to school, you do have the expense. So for instance, rent, you have that expense either way. So rent is not really a great schooling expense unless you were also saying, hey, I'm at this dorm or something like that. You could maybe throw it in there. And so your schooling would be higher, but then you wouldn't have a rent expense under needs. That's still a little bit iffy to me. I still like having rent, over there in that needed expenses for accuracy though. However, once I get to this number, I can say, all right, what is it per month? Equals the cell that contains my total, and I'll just divide it by 4, about 4 months per term. And that gives me a number like 435. All right, cool. I'm going to go to my schooling value and I'm just going to put in 500. Now, here's the thing that I think is a smarter way to think of this. If you are investing in yourself $500 a month, then you may not be investing in a Roth IRA or retirement account for $500 a month. So I might keep that category on there, but maybe I drop it down to 0. A little single minus sign means a 0 in accounting, so don't worry about that. Now, I still might be putting money into an emergency fund, so I still like having that. But don't forget, schooling, hopefully, is investing in yourself. Hopefully, you're getting a degree or you're on a training path that is going to lead to accomplishing some goals, some work goals, financial goals, So I have no problem putting schooling under the savings and investing category. Now, it still is a little bit low, 14.5%, which means I could play around with those numbers and say, well, all right, maybe I will take more credits and my schooling expenses will go up. Maybe in addition to schooling, I'm going to sign up for things like Udacity and Code Academy and things like that. I'm going to do extra schooling, extra schooling. And maybe that's $40 a month. And so as I put in new categories and new amounts, that's going to go in there. Maybe it looks like I can save into my emergency fund a little faster, and I'm going to put $200 in there. Okay. Maybe I can open up a Roth IRA and I can put $200 in there. Oops, that takes me a little too high. So I'll dial it back to about 100. And that gets me to 20.2% of my income. Excellent. That's the number I wanted. Now I'm going to look over at my expense needs and expense wants. Now this is, once again, it could be unrealistic. As a student, maybe your needed expenses are a bit higher and you really don't have much for wants. Okay, well, that's understandable. Maybe 30% going just to wants is a little bit too extreme. But you can play around with those numbers. So even though the rule is 50, 30, 20, maybe your rule is 60, 20, 20, or 70, 10, 20. And you can go that way. The other thing that could affect this, and this is what's great about Excel, is we can be a little bit more realistic. And if we change certain areas, it's going to change all of these formula results. For instance, let's say I'm not a Twitch streamer. I want to be, but I'm not making $350 from Twitch. I'm making $0 from Twitch. So I put a 0 for my Twitch streaming, that reduces my income, and that increases the percentage ratio for all of these factors, these expenses, as a percentage of income. Crap. So I've just reduced my income, which means it doesn't look like I can save as much into my savings and investing. Okay. Maybe my second job isn't really paying me $800. It's part-time, the hours are they're wacky and stuff like that. Maybe it's only $550 a month. So that reduces my income, which increases these ratios. So I'm going to drop them back a little bit more. All right. And things are starting to look a little bit rough here, but I'm at least getting closer to my 70%, 10%, 20. If that's my plan, I'll change this out here. 70, 10, 20. Okay, making a whole new rule of thumb. So that's what you can do with this. We've got some formulas in here. We've got some sum functions that are adding up cells. We've got a multiplication that I used in order to figure out cost per credit times the number of credits I'm taking. We've got a little sum formula in here. So if you're just adding up 2 or 3 numbers, then using the plus sign is perfectly fine. You don't always have to use a sum function. And then I've got a little division formula to calculate my tuition per month. But we're also using division in order to calculate total expense categories divided by total income. And we're just formatting those to look like percent numbers. Otherwise, I'm feeling pretty good about this. It would be great if my needed expenses were lower, but maybe I don't have a lot of room to work here. Can maybe get a roommate, maybe find something so that rent can go down. Maybe I can start eating a little bit more cheaply. Maybe there's some things I can do to reduce my utilities, but usually your needed expenses have very little wiggle room, at least not in the short term. Obviously, you can maybe next year or once the lease is up, you could find a cheaper place to live or get a cheaper living arrangement. Nothing's really cheap in Central Oregon, but maybe it means more roommates or shared spaces and stuff like that. But now we can play around with these numbers to affect these percentages to see if they're hitting our goals. Okay. So we've got some basic formulas here. Any questions on adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing numbers? I didn't do any subtraction, of course, but if you can add and multiply and divide, subtraction is pretty easy. It's just a minus sign. Okay. Next order of business is I want to create a pie chart. So if you weren't quite keeping up with me, here's what I'm going to need you to do. Excuse me. in some cells above these categories, just write in some percentages, okay? So even if you don't have the formulas, even if you don't have all this stuff, give yourself 3 areas right up here. I'm actually already starting to have, ooh, you know what I think I'm going to do to make this next step a little bit easier? I'm going to reverse these. I'm going to rig it so that my percentages are beneath my labels for expenses, needs, and wants and investing. So I'm going to do a little swapperoo. And if we do this carefully, it should all work out, but we do need to be cautious, I think. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on row 2. I'm going to right click on row 2, and I'm going to choose insert rows. And so it's given me a new row that's formatted like the row above it. That's okay. I'm going to select the cells in my row 4 now, which are my labels: income, expense, expenses, and savings and investing. I'm going to select those cells. Now watch what I do here. I'm selecting a range of cells. I'm going to put my cursor on the border. When I put my cursor on the border of that selected range, I get a little 4-way arrow. And I'm going to click and drag that upward so that it's right about there in my row 2 and let go. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. I'm going to select those empty cells that were part of that row 4. I'm selecting those empty cells. What is it? A4 through H4. I'm going to click my format painter, little yellow paintbrush, and I'm going to select A2 through H2. Oh, that didn't do what I wanted. I lost my merging. So I need to put my merging back, or I'll Control Z. I'm going to Control Z, and then I'll just Control Z to undo. I'm just going to make that row 2 a little shorter, maybe a little taller. All right, feeling pretty good about this. And now check this out. I'm not going to delete my row 4. I don't want to delete my row 4 because it's going to impact this other data that I have off to the side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the cells A4 through H4. I'm going to right click anywhere within that selected range. I'm going to choose delete, and I'm going to shift cells and shift up. I'm deleting the cells and I'm going to shift up. So before I do that again, I'm selecting this now empty range of cells, A4 through H4. I'm going to right click on that selected range, delete, cells, and shift up. There we go. Kind of getting back in business. I'll select these other cells and I'm going to apply all borders. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little formatting here too, I think. And I'm just playing around with different alignments and stuff. Cool. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Now that I've got this data, here's what you're going to need in order to create your pie chart the easiest anyway. I've got some text labels. And then just beneath those, I've got some percentages. Next order of business is to create the pie chart. When you want to create charts in Excel, I think the smartest thing to do is to select the data first. It's not 100% essential to select the data first, but it makes the following steps even easier. So I'm going to select the 6 cells that make up my data. I'm getting, for me, it's C2 through H2. So C2 through H2. It's got my text labels on one row, and then it's got my big percentages on the next row. Now that those cells are selected, On my home ribbon, I'm going to jump over to my insert ribbon, which is right next to the insert ribbon. I'm sorry, right next to the home ribbon. And I'm looking for charts. Now there's a chart selection tool right here, and I see the pie chart is one of the main ones. I can click on that drop down. I can get some other styles. I got a donut chart. Donut sounds good. I'll do a donut chart. Pick either of the pastry related charts. Okay, I'm going to get a donut chart. All right. Well, it's not as helpful as I would have hoped. Okay, you can see my pie chart is quite a bit wonky. It's not really legible. It doesn't know what to list here. I can see that it's got these little numbers down here. Even though I selected my data first, the chart clearly doesn't know what I'm doing. Okay, so that's going to be an issue. Now, part of the problem, I'm betting, is the fact that I have some merged cells. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple things first to see if I can't fix it. For instance, I see my chart is active, and there's this button over here to switch row and column on the left. So I'm going to click that. Looks neat, but it's still not quite correct. Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to, do I even want to, the way to correct this would probably be to go to select data and make sure we're getting the right stuff, but I'm going to cancel that. I still want to stress the importance of selecting the data and then going right into the chart. So I'm going to click on a blank area of my chart to select it, press the delete on my keyboard to get rid of it. And what I'm going to do next is down here below my worksheet, I'm going to create a separate little section of pie chart data. And I'm going to reference my existing data. So watch this. And I'd like you to do the same thing too. I'm going to write expenses and needs in one cell. I'm working in cell C13 down there towards the bottom. Right beneath that, I'm going to write expenses wants. Actually, I'll shorten this up. I'll just write needs. Then I'll write wants. And then after that, I'll put in saving. So I've got needs, wants, and savings down there just at the bottom. Now next to my, yeah, what's up?
So I've been trying to do this pie chart. When I select those 6 cells where I do the expenses, savings, and then the 3 percentages, and I go to click the pie chart, it brings up a blank, like it doesn't bring me up a chart at all.
Yeah, I don't know if you were able to catch mine, but I had a very similar bad issue. And so what I'm doing right now is going to solve that problem. And I'm pretty sure the problem with both of our pie charts is that I've got these merged cells, and Excel is a little bit confused about handling these cells that are combined with each other. So what I'm doing to remedy this is I'm going to make a little section down here out of the way, which I'm going to use to produce the pie chart. So pick 3 cells. I picked C13 through C15, and I just wrote needs, wants, and saving. Now for the cell next to my needs, here's what you're going to do. You're going to press the equal sign, and you're going to click on the cell that contains your total needed expenses. And then just press the enter key. This allows you to have one cell that is equal to another cell. I'll do that again for wants though. I'm going to go to the cell next to my wants label. I'm going to press the equal sign, and I'm going to click on the cell that contains my total want expenses. And I'm actually glad this little hiccup is happening, because I do want you to see how you can make one cell reference exactly another cell. I'm going to do this again a third time. I'm going to click on the cell next to the word savings. I'm going to press my equal sign, and I'm going to click on the cell that contains my total savings, investing, schooling. So now I've got this little table of data down here. needs, wants, and savings, and I've got the various numbers, and they're all dynamically linked, by the way. So for instance, if my entertainment expense goes up to 150, oops, I'm gonna put in a number so it gets to exactly 10% or very close anyway. There we go, 10%. And I'm going to increase something over here. I'm going to increase my car cost. Let's see how. Ooh. Healthcare. Add something else in there. I should have insurance probably. I'll assume that's under the car. Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm a little bit over, but okay. Now, as I was changing these values, it was changing my totals, but it's also changing these cells down here because these cells are equivalent to those other cells. So that's what's nice about using a cell reference, a value that refers to another cell's value. So basically, we've got a section of worksheet, which is nice and it's formatted and it's pretty. And this is for people to look at and work with. This other little baby table right down here is only serving a limited purpose. It's there just to produce a pie chart. So now that I've got that data, watch how much more successful I'm going to be this time. I'm going to select these 6 cells. For me, it's C13 to D15. So basically, it's just this little group of 6 cells. I'm going to select them first. I'm going to go to my insert ribbon. I'm going to click on my chart drop down, and I'm going to try that donut chart. Now my donut chart is going to be much more accurate. I've got my 3 categories, needs, wants, and savings, and I can just look at this donut chart or pie chart, whichever one you did, and it makes sense. The blue section is my needs, and that's like 70% of the pie chart. My orange wants is only 10%, and my gray savings is 20%. It would be even better if this chart actually had labels. So after you create a chart like this, doesn't matter, I can click and move it around. But when my chart is active, I can do some customization. For instance, I see up here we've got data labels. Now remember, I'm using the web-based Excel 365. The installed version has all of the same features plus more. So you can do even more, even though they might be in a different spot. So let me show data labels, see what that does. Okay, so that puts dollar amounts on there. Actually, that doesn't necessarily bother me too much. It would be nice if I could also show the percentages, which I know is a feature on the installed version of Excel. It should be a feature on here too. Let's see if I can't, can I right click on these? Ooh, I can right click on any of these numbers and I can go to format. And that brings up this pane off to the side. Interesting. I'm going to look at the series 1 drop down. Oh, then I see data labels. Look at this. It's got value, but I can also check the percentage box. So that's going to display the dollar amount and the percent. So I just did, let me bring this back up again. I right click on any of those little data labels that I displayed and I went to format. And that opens up this pane over on the side. It does the same kind of thing in the installed Excel. And I did a little exploring. I went to series 1 and then I went to the data labels drop down and they've got all these check boxes here. I could choose, I guess, series name as well. That starts to get a little cluttered. So I'm just going to do value and percentage. I think that looks pretty good. Ooh, I can control my donut hole size. That's kind of neat. I'm going to play with that. I don't know if I've ever even done a donut chart. No, I'm going to make the donut hole smaller, which makes my, I guess I could just type a number in there too. I just did 40. Okay. Varied colors by slice. I'm going to uncheck that and see what happens. Oh, it makes it all one color. That's boring. Let me check it again. All right. I feel pretty good about that. I think it looks nice. I'm going to go to the chart title options and see what it gives me as an example. Instead of the words chart title, I'm going to update my chart title so it seems a little bit more realistic, or at least a little more descriptive. And this is basically my percentage. I'll do this. Expense percentage income. Title position above, I'm happy with that. Font, that's fine. Okay, now if I'm satisfied with all that, I can close these options. There's a little close X. And now my chart is updated. Yeah, maybe it could still use some improvement, but I think it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to make this chart a little bit smaller. I'm just clicking and dragging the corners, the sizing handles. And I'm going to move it off to the side just a bit. I'll zoom out a little bit here. I just wanted to be able to see the pie chart off to the side, but also be able to see the source data. So for instance, my needed expenses is taking up 70% of my income. Well, maybe an opportunity arises where my rent can drop dramatically. I got a little minivan, little Ford Transit minivan. Maybe I'm going to sleep in my minivan for a few months. And so, which basically means my rent is going to go to zero, which is going to have a tremendous reduction on my needed expenses. And I can see it was instantly reflected in my pie chart. The blue section, the needs, has dropped from 70% to 45%. Cool. Now, maybe doing this, reducing those expenses like that, is going to allow me to really ramp up some other area. So maybe I want to save a bunch into retirement fund, or pay off schooling, or pay off some other kind of debt or something like that. Well, then I could put it in a wants category, or I could replace my rent needs with maybe debt payoff needs. I could reduce the amount of debt. Maybe I've got another category in here like credit card or something, and I want to pay, $1,500 a month to that. Just by reducing one category, or reducing one item within a category and increasing another item within the category. So this is what we want to use Excel for. We want to be able to provide some data and get some information back. The information we're getting back are these percentages, and we're also getting some visual information in the form of a chart. And then by changing some of our inputs, it produces new output, and we can start to make decisions based on it. Maybe my job pay is only $2,000, which means all of my expenses combined are going to be a little bit too much. So I need to start playing around with these values. We didn't do it here. That'll be something I'll have you do on your own sometime, is total up all these expense categories to find out what our total expenses are. Do our total expenses ever exceed our total income? They shouldn't. That would be bad if they did. Now, we ended up doing quite a bit on this sheet. We don't have too much more to do, but I do want to do something else. We did a payment function on Monday, and I want to do a payment function again. I want that repetition. I want you to see that stuff again and again, but I really like this stuff on here. So for participation 6B, which we'll turn in a little bit, we're not done with it yet, but what I'm looking for on there is going to be a variety of Excel skills. What kind of Excel skills do we have on here? Well, we're definitely entering in text and numbers. Okay, definitely I want you to be able to do that. I want you to be able to format cells. And that means I want you to be able to change the borders, the colors, the fonts, all that stuff. I also want you to be able to format numbers. I want you to be able to convert numbers into percentage, or counting, or currency, or just plain old comma style, general plain numbers. I want you to be able to format cells, format numbers. I want you to be able to write formulas like add, subtract, multiply, divide. So have some examples of your ability to work with formulas on here. I also want you to be able to produce a pie chart or donut, either one. Produce a pie chart, and then also format a chart or change the formatting of a chart. Make it look a little different than how it looked when you first created it. These are a pretty good mix of skills. The only problem with a class like this is that we don't practice everything as much as you should. So in class, I'm kind of forcing you to practice it a little bit. On your own, while you're studying this week, you should be practicing it even more. So these are the kinds of things I would look for in your participation 6B. And if you've got them here, I think you did good on 6A as well. So if you didn't get to our 6A practice, don't worry about it. Make sure you've got good variety of Excel skills on this one, and you'll be golden. Like I said, though, we're not 100% done yet. This is our basic budget sheet. I'm feeling pretty good about it. If we had more time, I would probably figure out what our total expenses were, and I would try to make sure that our total expenses never exceeded our total income. But I want to do some other stuff. So in the lower left corner, I'm going to create a brand new sheet. I'm going to click a little plus. I'm going to double click on that new sheet tab, and I'm going to call this my debt payoff calculator. And I'm going to click OK. Now on Monday, we use the payment function in order to calculate a car payment. I'm going to use the payment function again today, but I'm going to use it in a different application. I want you to see how you can use the same function in slightly different situations, okay? That's going to make Excel even more useful, because then you can use Excel in order to figure out what a car payment is. Well, maybe you don't want to get a car payment. You shouldn't really. Car payments are bad. But maybe you want to use Excel to figure out how you can pay off existing debt, or how you can, instead of a car payment, what would a mortgage payment be? That kind of thing. So let's see what we can accomplish here. I'm going to zoom in on this new sheet. In cell A1, I'm going to write debt. And when I'm talking about debt here, we could do student loans or something like that. I'm going to call it a credit card calculator. I'm going to select a group of cells, doesn't matter how many, and I'm going to merge. I'm going to make my font a little bigger. And I'm going to change my text color to light pink and my fill color to dark brown. Cool, can handle that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my column A nice and wide. And I'm going to start to put in some information here. Ooh, I'm going to let me do some quick research here. Let's see. New tab. What is the average credit card? I should be doing median credit card debt. Median credit card debt. Let's see. I don't know. This could be pretty good. We're not writing a research paper, so even if this data is a little bit off, what are they telling us here? Median debt per American family is $2,700, while the average debt stands at $6,200. Now that's per family. The average balance for consumers is $5,300, although some of that debt may be held on joint cards amongst, husband, wife, or stuff like that. Overall, Americans owe $807 billion across almost 506 million cards. Okay, so we've got a couple different numbers here. Average American family credit card debt, $6,200. All right, we'll go by that. So go back to here, remaximize. And in cell A2, I'm going to go ahead and write down credit card debt. Again, you're going to turn this into me, so you don't have to put in real numbers for you, because it's the formulas that are the important thing. So I'm going to put in $6,200, which is sounds like it's pretty much the average credit card debt. If you've got credit card debt, maybe that number's bigger, maybe that number's smaller. Doesn't matter. Put in the same thing that I'm putting in, so that way you can see that our calculations all work out the same. Okay, so that's my credit card debt. Now, after that, I'm going to go ahead and put in my interest rate on the credit card. Now, what if you have like 2 or 3 credit cards? Okay, if you have 2 or 3, you just kind of add them up in your head. And then for the interest rate, you just kind of, what's the average interest rate? It's not 100% accurate, but it's a pretty good guess. I'm going to say the interest rate is 18%. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. And now, how long to pay off? Let's say my goal for paying off this credit card is I want to pay it off in 24 months. Okay, I want to pay it off in 24 months. Now I'm going to figure out what is my monthly pay amount. So I'm putting in some labels. I need to put in some inputs for Excel so that it can properly tell me the answer to my question. How much do I need to pay each month in order to pay off my credit card debt in 24 months? Assuming I've got $6,200 in debt and I've got an 18% charge or finance charge on that credit card. And then once we get this proper, we can change these numbers around so we can see what the impact is going to be. Okay. Anybody want to put in chat a guess? So before even calculating, what is the answer going to be? Any guesses? Yeah, that's pretty. So what do you got? B2 times B3 divided by B4. That would be a good estimate. That wouldn't be an accurate number, but that's a great way of thinking about it. So basically saying, all right, well, 6,200, what I was doing in my head when I asked you that question, I was basically taking B2 divided by B4, and then I was just going to round up from there. Okay. Either way, we're never going to do the math unless you're like a real math magician or something. We're not going to do the math in our head so accurate that we're going to get it to the penny, but we could estimate. So we'll say, let's say I was going with 6,200. Well, 6,200 divided by 20, well, 6,200 divided by 10 would be 620. 6,200 divided by 20 would be 310. So 6,200 divided by 24 is going to be a number smaller than 310. Who knows? Maybe 270, 280, something like that. Well, there is that finance charge of 18%. So that's good to factor that in. So maybe it is closer to like 310 or 300 or something like that. So my guess is going to be somewhere in the 300 to 310 range. And that's just numbers. I'm kind of educated guessing in my head based on what we've got here. The actual formula to figure out the monthly payment is very complicated though. So that's why we're using a function that's built into Excel. On Monday, I told you this, a function is a shorthand version of writing a complicated formula. So here's what we're going to write. Let me zoom in a little bit more on this. So on the cell or in the cell that contains my monthly pay amount, for me, it's B5, you're going to write this equals PMT for payment, opening parentheses. For the rate, you're going to click on the cell that contains that percentage rate, that 18%, and you're going to divide it by 12 and then write a comma. We did the same thing on Monday when we were doing that car payment calculator. Basically, you pay a monthly credit card payment. That means the loan or the debt is compounded on a monthly basis. And so we need to take that annual 18% and convert it into a monthly percent. That one's actually kind of easy to do, right? So that would just be like 1.5%. 18 divided by 12. Okay, and then we got the comma. Now the next is the number of payment periods. How many payments do we want to make to pay off this credit card? I'm going to click on the cell that contains that 24 for 24 months, and then comma. And then next is going to be the present value. That's going to be the amount of the credit card debt. On Monday, it was the amount of the car loan. Well, credit card debt is kind of like a loan. You borrowed the money from the credit card company in order to buy the things or, whatever it was. Same concept. I type a minus sign. We did that on Monday as well. And I click on the cell that contains my credit card debt. And then I type a closing parentheses. So those are the three parts that we're putting into this calculator. It's the annual rate divided by 12, comma, the number of months that we're paying off, comma, then a negative version of the loan amount. Now I'm going to press enter. Remember, my guess was around 300, 310. Look at that, 309. So if I have $6,200 in credit card debt, and that credit card or credit cards have pretty much an 18% interest rate, and I want to pay it off in 24 months, then I'm going to have to pay basically $310 a month for the next 2 years. And I can't use the credit cards anymore. I got to cut up the credit cards. And then it'll be all paid off. Now, what if I can't quite afford $310 a month? Okay, well, maybe instead of 24 months, maybe I do this over 30 months. If I spread off my plan over 30 months instead of 24, that means I can pay a little bit less per month. It'll take me longer to achieve my goal, but maybe this goal is more realistic and attainable. Remember those SMART goals. Specific. This is very specific. Remember SMART goals? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant to you, time-bound. If this is my goal, I can easily write this as a SMART goal. It is very specific. I'm going to pay off this credit card about $260 a month over the next 30 months. It's very measurable because I can easily track if I'm accomplishing this goal or not. Is it attainable? That's a personal judgment. Can I afford to pay $260 a month towards this credit card over the next couple of years? If I can, then it's a very attainable goal. Is it relevant? It is relevant because I came up with the goal. This goal is important to me, so it's very relevant. And of course, it's time bound. I definitely will show that formula again, Malia. And it's time bound because I've got a deadline. I've got 30 months to do this. So here it is. And it's called a function, even though I will often say formula too, but there's a slight difference between formulas and functions, but they still allow us to do the same thing, and that's calculate. So here it is. It's my payment function. Now, of course, in order for this payment function to work, I did have to have the inputs already set up. I have to tell Excel basically 3 pieces of information in order to get that really important answer. It's my annual rate divided by 12, comma, and then the number of payment periods or months, comma, and then a negative version of my credit card debt amount. You will have an assignment relatively soon where you're going to calculate several little calculators using the payment function. Now, of course, you can always jump back to your resources, the videos that I provide, and our class recording and the files you've created to remind yourself how to do a payment function. When you have to do another payment function on your own, I would prefer that you retype it. Okay, you can look at what you did before, but don't just click on a cell and copy and paste it. You take away that extra learning potential there. So there we go. Now, did anybody get a really wacky number? Because sometimes we can make a mistake on these formulas and the number just totally doesn't make sense. For instance, a common mistake I see with students is they forget to divide by 12, or maybe they mistakenly, maybe they mistakenly multiply by 12. And so if you make some little mistake in your function, you could end up with a really wacky number. There we go. That doesn't make sense. If I have $6,200 of credit card debt, there's no way the monthly cost is going to be $13,000. So if you ever get a number that's like way off the wall, be honest. You may not know what the mistake is, but you can acknowledge that you made a mistake. So you can always, contact me right after class or something and say, hey, Ralph, you know what? I know I've got a mistake in my payment function. I'm not 100% sure what the mistake is, but my number is way off. Okay, perfect. That's great. Probably the most frustrating thing is if we make a mistake and we don't even notice it, especially when the mistake is really that glaring. So yeah, I need to take that annual rate and divide by 12. Sometimes people will forget to even divide by 12, and that's also going to give a really big number. Okay, well, that doesn't make sense either, because over $1,000 a month for 30 months, that's over 30 grand. Do you really think it's going to take 30,000 to pay off 6,200? No. So be prepared to look at the results when you get them and see if they make sense. For instance, there's my monthly payoff. How much total paid? What's my total paid? It's going to be equal to the amount I paid per month times the number of months I had to pay it. So if I have $6,200 in credit card debt and I'm going to pay it off over 30 months, how much did I actually have to pay? Well, it'll be the monthly payment times the number of months you paid it. One cell times another cell. When I press enter, I can see I had to spend about $7,700 in order to pay off the $6,200. Why is it more? It's because the credit card charges interest. That's how credit card companies make money. They make money on that interest. They don't want you to pay off your credit card. They want you to keep a balance, because if you keep a balance, they make money on those monthly interest charges. The longer you have a balance, the more money they make. The higher your balance, the more money you make. The more you use the credit card, the more it raises your balance, the more money they make. However, it hurts you, right? Because if you're paying $258 a month to pay off a credit card, that means you have $258 that you can't invest in yourself with schooling. That means you have $258 that you can't put into your retirement fund. That means you have $258 that you can't enjoy yourself a little bit and go dining out or get Hulu streaming or something like that. So if you've got credit card debt, you might consider it a needed expense, or maybe you put it down as a want expense. You want to pay off that debt. That's pretty, I think that's respectable. So either way, factor that in. And if you're paying off credit card debt, which is super important, I think, that just might mean you have to give up a want expense, or you have to give up saving and investing. I think it's better to pay off debt before you invest in the stock market and stuff like that. So that's our debt payoff calculator. Zoom out for a bit. Cool. Okay. So on the sheet we made before, we did a car payment calculator using a very similar technique. You're going to have to do this soon enough, and I've got videos that show how to do it. But you can do a payment function also to calculate a house payment, a mortgage payment. That could be kind of a little interesting practice. So if anybody tries that, gives it a shot, maybe try it this afternoon and let me know how it went. Okay. Same basic concept, a couple little differences, but see if we can figure those out. Now I'm ready to turn this in. I feel pretty good about this one. It's got a lot of Excel features on this sheet here. And then we got another example of the payment function on this other sheet. So if you're ready to turn this in, here's what you'll do. I'm using the web-based version of Excel 365. So I'm going to click the File menu, top left corner, and I'm going to download a copy. I'm going to open this folder up just so I can see where it is. So it saved it into my downloads folder. So I've got a copy of this file in my downloads folder on my computer. I'm gonna make a mental note of that. Then I go to Blackboard. Do I have Blackboard open? I don't even have Blackboard open. Again. Everybody using their password managers. I've been relying on it a ton lately. It's been pretty nice. Okay, I'm gonna head over to 101. I'm gonna go to weekly activities. I'm gonna go all the way down to week 6. He has a couple more things in here. There's a video on using the round function. Study up on that one. It's not just takes a few minutes. Another video on creating a pie chart, stock column chart. So there's a bunch of other resources in here that you should be checking out. All right, I'm going to go to 6B. I'm going to click on the black link, which is the title, 6B, and I'm going to browse my local files. And I need to go to my downloads folder. Can I find it? There's my downloads folder. And there it is, participation 6B. Click that. And there we go. Go ahead and submit that. If you turn in 6B, but I don't notice that you did participation 6A, I'm going to give you credit for 6A, because what we did today, I think, is pretty much of same difficulty of what we did on Monday. So I have no problem giving you credit for both of those, assuming you took care of what we did today. I saw someone do a little hand raise for a second. That reminded me, I was signed in into Zoom on my tablet yesterday. And it's because I had it in my kitchen while I was prepping some food and stuff. But when I held my hand in front of the camera knew, and it put up the little raise hand icon. And then that intrigued me. So then I did a little thumbs up, and it knew that I was doing that, and it put the little icon on there. However, I noticed it doesn't seem to work here on this system. So don't know why, but it worked on my tablet version for Zoom. All right, and then I'm going to hit cancel because I can't really submit one of these files in here because I'm on a teacher account. Excellent. So that is going to basically conclude our main portion of the class. Are there any follow-up questions? Anybody confused or need some clarification on something we did here today? And of course, I'm going to get the recording out there, so you'll be able to access that one later on too. Okay, so ultimately our goal is to practice Excel. And when I'm practicing Excel, I like to do things that are realistic to my life. And hopefully you'll do things that are realistic to your life, because if you have more meaning and purpose in using the program, you're more likely to spend time learning how to use the program. So I do like personal finance topics quite a bit. Maybe you don't care for them so much, which means you just need to kind of think of other reasons that you might want to put in and try some Excel stuff. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be complicated, but hopefully it'll be interesting to you, so that way you can try out some things and ask questions and stuff like that. So with that, I'm going to see everybody in about 5 days. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I'll get the video process, the recording process, upload that, put the link out there. So if you would, go ahead and finish or tweak your spreadsheet where you need to, submit it in Blackboard, and I'll see you in about 5 days. Bye all. That's all. And if you've got some follow-up question for me, I'll hang out for a few minutes too if you wanted to hang out. But I'm going to turn off the recorder though.